Okay, good morning, Boker Tov, and welcome to Worldwide Wisdom. As we're learning today about Hanukkah, the deeper insight into Hanukkah, what the Kabbalah says about evil people. What does the Kabbalah have to say about evil people? Where do these people come from? What drives them? Why? Why are they evil? Now, when you ask that question from a normal consciousness level, it's a difficult conversation. And you just come to the conclusion that, what conclusion do you come to? What drives evil people? Hate.
Fear.
Trauma. They're just evil. They're just black, right? They're just dark, and we've got to just get rid of them, right? But the Kabbalah today is going to introduce us to a perspective that I'm not sure you're going to be happy with. It's deep, it's real, it's profound. And I pray to God that I'll be able to explain it well. Okay? So what the Kabbalah has to say about evil people. We are in the midst of learning the Maimer Mitzvasa Mishatishka Achama, the discourse that the Rebbe delivered in 1978, December of 1978, on Hanukkah, about the deeper meaning of Hanukkah. We are moving through this discourse slowly but surely every couple of days, and we were speaking here about the mitzvah. We're trying to understand the essence, the truth, the authenticity of Hanukkah. And the way we explained it is by asking a very fundamental question: why is it that this mitzvah is different to all the other mitzvahs? Other mitzvahs are lit in the day, are illuminated, or performed in the daytime. This is a very unusual mitzvah. It's done in the nighttime, and we explained that the purpose of the mitzvah of Hanukkah, is to tackle darkness. Whereas other mitzvahs like tefillin is in the daytime, Shabbos candles is in the daytime, the menorahs in the Holy Temple were lit in the daytime. They were all there to add light. The mitzvah of Hanukkah to this very day is to fight against darkness, forces of evil, specifically in the narrative of the story, the Greeks. We spoke about the Greeks. The Greeks were a deep, dark evil. What was their particularly dark evil is that, different to other anti-Semites that try to kill the Jewish people, here they were trying to assimilate us, which is much more complex. They were fighting not Jews, they were fighting Judaism. And that's much more dangerous. It's much more dangerous. It's like, think about an enemy that tries to kill you and then you fight back. But then there's an enemy that tries to infiltrate your schools, infiltrate your motherboard, your brain, to seduce your brain and heart, and to like gaslight you into not being sure of who you are. And now, how do you fight such an enemy? You know, it's one thing when you know who the enemy is. I mean, think about how Hamas and Hezbollah fights, right? So these cowards fight behind civilians, right? That's how they fight. They hide behind pregnant women and children. So Israel has a very difficult time where they have to attack the bad guys, but you got to sort of differentiate. And of course, the world screams in condemnation. Did you hear? You heard? Was it the United Nations that condemned Israel yesterday for violations in Syria? I mean, you can't even make this stuff up. Like, there's only one problem going on in Syria right now, and that is Israel. There's nothing else. Everything's fine in Syria. No problems. Just one single problem, and that is Israel. I mean, you can't even make this stuff up, right? Yeah. It's like the fact that they stored chemical weapons in civilian population centers. There's weird green smoke and funny smells in Damascus. No problem. I guess it's just, perfume factories. But Israel is the problem in Syria right now. It's just incredible. So when it comes to Israel fighting their enemies, it's very hard because you got to differentiate between the bad guys and the good guys, and unless you adopt the doctrine that those who harbor terrorists are terrorists themselves. Wasn't that the Bush doctrine?
Yes.
I think it was. Why don't we just apply that one?
Yep.
Those who harbor terrorists are terrorists themselves. Now, I don't know if Israel is applying that or not. I'm not sure exactly familiar. But it's very difficult to fight guerrilla warfare when they're fighting like cowards. Even more difficult is when you're not even sure, because you're not sure who the enemy is. But even more difficult is when you're not sure if the enemy is the enemy or your friend. Right? That's how the Greeks were fighting us. And that's the darkness that we're illuminating here in Hanukkah. And we can understand how relevant that is today, when we're not talking about an ancient nation that no longer exists with which we're waging battle, like the Egyptians or the Persians or something like that. Today, we're still fighting the war against the Greeks, right? What the Rebbe is about to explain in this discourse. It's so incredible. The Rebbe is explaining now that the Mishnah says, remember, the Mishnah is the oral Torah. It says you have to light the menorah from nightfall, right? From the time that the sun sets, to be more specific, right? From the sun sets. Until when? We said until, now the Mishnah just says until the scavengers. What? No, it's not what it says. Not what it says in the Mishnah. It's still, by the way, you have to have a certain amount of candle size. You can't just light any candle. It's got to be a certain amount of time, like 30 minutes, right? But it says you're allowed to light the candles until the scavengers are no longer in the marketplace. Now, this is where we ended up in the last class of this. What does it mean until the scavengers are no longer in the marketplace? This is people that collect chips of wood and leftover rubble and, like broken cartons in the marketplace. Is that some sort of an arbitrary reference to time when they could have just said, 3 a.m. or 1 a.m.? They could have just said that. Could have just said, 1 hour after midnight if you wanted to be a little more biblical. The Rebbe points out that there's no word in the oral Torah that is by mistake. Every single word is precise. And the fact that it says until the scavengers are no longer in the marketplace is precise. The word used for scavengers is tar mudoi. Tar mudoi means is the same letters as moredet, which means rebels. So scavengers is the same exact letters in Hebrew as the word rebels. Now in Hebrew you can do this. You can't do that to an English word. You can't say, well, your name is Marty, and Marty is the same letters as another word, frog is something. The frog cousin. Therefore, Marty's a frog. You can't say that. You know what I mean? In English, it doesn't work like that because in English the sequence of the letters is precise and prime. But in Hebrew, the letters are actually numbers. The letters are actually numbers. And therefore, they can be rearranged because the words are values beyond being just ideas. So whilst the word might be an idea, because the letters are actually numbers, they compute to a certain total, which has its own standalone meaning, right? So when you take the letters of the word tar mudai, which is the scavengers in the marketplace, it can be rearranged to read moredet, which means rebels. So now it says you light the Hanukkah candles until the rebels are no longer in the marketplace. And the word no longer in Hebrew, in the Mishnah, was adikalia, until the rebels are kalia. There was two interpretations. One meaning of the word kalia means destroyed, until the rebels are eliminated, are neutralized. But there was another meaning to the word kalia. And that was where we left off. Kalia meant elevated. Until the rebels are elevated. That's how we left it off. Until the bad guys are turned into good guys. That is the challenge that the Mishnah is calling us to achieve on Hanukkah. So it's one thing for you to say, I'm ready for Hanukkah. I got my Hanukkah lights. I got my candles. I got my dreidels. I'm ready. That's Hanukkah 1.0, guys. We're way ahead of that. This is the circle of higher consciousness. This is worldwide wisdom here. So what it's saying is that you have to light those Hanukkah lights until you can turn the darkness into light, until the bad guys are inspired to become good guys, until Hezbollah fights to defend Israel. Like, really? I mean, this is just, it's like almost impossible. But this is the call of the Mishnah. That's what the Mishnah is telling us to do. How am I supposed to process this piece of information? Right? What exactly am I supposed to do now? Send a team of psychologists, of child therapists out to X, Y? I don't know why it's being cut off. Has anybody else been complaining that they can't get the signal? I don't know what it is. We're just doing our thing. So anyways, how can we possibly reach such a state? So here's what we're about to do. In the classic style of Chassidus, beyond just dropping a bombshell on the table, we're now going to break it apart and understand it. And what we're about to do, the Kabbalah is about to open our eyes as to what it is that is, who are evil people, right? Again, like we started off. So what are evil people? And by the way, today's Torah studies are sponsored by Andy Siegelstein and Hannah Siegelstein in Elevation of the Soul of Andy's father on the occasion of his yahrzeit today, Dov Ben Yisrael. May his neshama. Beryl, his known as Beryl, may his neshama be elevated in Gan Eden, and I know that he was a victim of the Holocaust, right? Survivor. I mean, a victim still. She's still a victim, but he was a survivor of very evil people. So what can we do with this piece of information, right? So here the Kabbalah is going to tell us like this, that every single thing in existence comes from God. Everything that exists comes from God, and we also know that Ein Ra Yerid Milamayla, no evil descends from above. No. One, everything comes from God. Plus one, no evil comes from God. Equals two. Bad guys are
also good,
not evil. That's what the Kabbalah is telling us. Why? Now, whoa. Before you throw the tomatoes, right? So what does this mean? The bad guys are not evil. What does this mean? What the Kabbalah is about to explain to us is that in their root, they all come from God, and that root might have become corrupted. So their soul root is from God. The way that they manifest down in this world, is such that spiritual goodness that they are at their root could have easily become corrupted. Let me give an example. Could be. So free will. Maybe free will holds a bit of a key here. Maybe free will holds some sort of a connection there. Let's hold that thought for a little bit. But let me give an example. So Tanya chapter 2 tells us that every single Jew comes from God's essence. That's what it says. And this might really hold the key to our explanation, the Tanya chapter 2. It says like this, every single Jew comes from God's essence. Why? Because we are the sons of God. That's what it says in the Torah. Bani b'chari Yisrael. You are my son, my firstborn Israel. So we are all children of God. Now, if we're children of God, therefore, just like a child resembles his father physically, right? Because the child comes from the DNA of the dad, so too, we come from God's essence. You'll tell me not all Jews are the same. Some Jews, can you say that a righteous man like the Baba Sali or Maimonides or the Baal Shem Tov or Rashi or Rabbi Akiva or Hillel and Shammai, can you say that they're the same as George Soros? Can you say that they're the same as Bernie Sanders? Can you say that they're the same as Bernie Madoff? I mean, right? Differences. So the Tanya goes on to explain as follows. Tanya Alter Rebbe explains that he says like this, that if you track the physical evolution of an embryo, you can understand the spiritual evolution of a soul. If you can track the physical evolution of an embryo, you can understand the spiritual evolution of an embryo, of a soul. Here's how it works. We all, when it comes to a baby, it's an embryo. Every single part of the body comes from the sperm meeting the egg, right? Forming a zygote, which then forms a embryo, which then becomes a fetus, which then becomes a baby, right? So sperm and egg are two cells, which contain they create that little fetus, embryo, let's call it an embryo, which contains the entirety of the human body. So which means the baby's brain, which is the most elevated part of the baby, and the baby's toenail are all contained in that original embryo, right? Amazing, right? Stem cells. Is that what it is in the mom in the fallopian tube?
Specialize in different directions.
Yeah, but in the original, most basic format.
Right.
Right. And what's the base? That's not. Is that not an embryo? It's what it is, right?
Switches get turned on. So yeah.
Okay, in the original, most basic form, it's an embryo, right? And it's a very basic embryo, but it's got everything in there from the brain of the child to the toenail of the child and the pancreas and the eyeball and the chin and the shoulder and the lungs, right? Everything is in there. Now, how is it that this becomes the brain and this becomes a toenail? I mean, you can't exactly put the toenail and the brain in the same room. You can't say they're exactly the same. The reason is because through 9 months of gestation, what happens is that they evolve differently. They all have the same roots, but they evolve differently. Some parts of the child maintain their original state. You know, the Kabbalah says that the sperm of the father originates in the brain of the father, which is the loftiest. Well, it definitely goes down the spine. Well, that says something about a spinal cord. Look, Marty. Tanya says that it comes through the spinal cord. Now, could be the Tanya that science hasn't caught up yet. For example, there's electrical impulses that go down the spinal cord that create the orgasm and everything else, right? You know that. So there is certain some sort of spinal impulses that go down the spine. But where do they come from? From the brainstem. I mean, you can understand that. The question is, which is why it's pleasurable to have relations. But the brain of the father, which is the highest quality of the father, is the origin of the sperm, which is why the child's highest qualities can resemble the father's brain. The child's brain can resemble the father's brain because the brain of the child didn't evolve. It just maintained its original status. That's why the child many times has the same brain as the father. You know, there's many stories of children that have the same thinking patterns of the father. It's actually a beautiful story of one of my ancestors. He was known as Rabbi Elchanan the Pope. I'm sure I shared the story with you. I'm only going to touch on it. Rabbi Elchanan the Pope. And how did they find out that Rabbi Elchanan the Pope, how did they figure out that he was a kidnapped child of Jewish people? Because his father played chess with him. And when his father lost the game of chess to the Pope, the father was blown away because he never lost a game of chess. And he realized that the thinking patterns of this child were his own thinking patterns. He was beaten by his own skill. And he realized this is uncanny. It's not possible that this person, this young Pope over here, beat me in a game of chess. There's something eerie. Who are you? Where are you from? He challenged him. He dug deeper until eventually he sang the lullaby that he would sing to him before he was kidnapped. And they realized father and son embraced, right? So the father and the son had the same brain, right? Because the child's brain does not evolve from its original state. It just maintains its original status. But then you have other parts of the body that evolve, pancreas, lungs, right? Whatever. Digestive system, they go and become different parts of the child to the point that you can't recognize them. I mean, think about it like this. Think about if I asked you where you come from right now. Where are you from?
From Baltimore.
Where are you from?
Chicago.
Anybody else?
Romania.
I disagree with all of your answers.
I'm from God.
Now we're getting somewhere. He says Vitebsk. Interesting. He's from Vitebsk. He says he's from God. Anybody else? Oh, he says from his father. In other words, the question is, how do you identify right here, right now? Baltimore, Chicago. And then when I challenged you, it was like, actually, Vitebsk. Why did you stop at Vitebsk? Why did you go back only two generations?
Pagria, because those are the only places.
Yeah. Okay, fine. How about nobody here said Adam? Nobody said Adam. Nobody said the Garden of Eden. Nobody said they're Iraqi. I come from the Garden of Eden somewhere in the Middle East. Nobody said that. I did ask you. Well, you see what I'm saying? So here we identify. The question, everybody needs to know how you identify today.
Who are you, not where you're from?
Same thing, same question. Who are you? Where are you from? Where are you from? Right? And the question is, where are you from? Right? So when you think about it today, you've evolved to the point that you identify as an American citizen. When you said Vitebsk, you were like, actually, I'm identifying as a more of a Jewish thing. When you said something about God, you were like, essential. Yeah. Deep down, you were like, I am a soul. I'm not even a body. I'm a soul, right? So whereas your answer might have been that I'm a body which has a soul, his answer was like, I am a soul which happens to have a body, right? You see how we have different levels of consciousness, right? And there's no right or wrong answer because we've evolved in the same way, right? So if you ask me where I'm from, I could tell you I'm from South Africa, or I could tell you I'm from Palm Beach Gardens. I can tell you I'm from heaven. I can tell you I'm from Israel, depending which part of the family you want to know, right? So it depends, right? So in exactly the same way, our body parts all evolved from the same embryo in different ways. The souls of our generation, all the souls in our generation are evolved from God, from the same place in God. Some of us evolved very, very, very little, and these are the righteous tzaddikim of the generation. the holiest people of the generation, that you look at them and you just see God. Certain righteous people. You look at the Rebbe, for example, and you see just a righteous person. Then you look at someone like a Sandy Koufax, and you don't see an angel. You see a baseball player. Okay, different, right? You see someone else, and you see a politician. You see Debbie Wasserman Schultz. What do you see? I don't know. Your decision. What you see over there, right? But you see different things. This is a politician. This is a lawyer. This is an entrepreneur. This is a loser. This is a winner, right? And you see different various evolutions. Yeah.
So did you also see that some people have risen in their field, or they do things that, where do they get these abilities from? And then you can say those abilities came from.
The question is if they give any credit to that. So you have a guy that wins the award over there at the Oscars or whatever that was a few weeks after October 7th, and he's a Jewish guy, and for whatever movie he made about the Holocaust, and he gets up there and he renounces his Jewish identity, right? So here you go, instead of giving credit to his skills, he throws his own people and himself under the bus in the hopes, right? In the hopes of somehow getting the Gentiles or the anti-Semites to love him more because he hates himself. I mean, such warped thinking. This guy's like totally confused. Yeah.
This is, I think, the whole journey. Who am I and why am I here?
This is exactly who am I and why am I here? This is very, very profound. This is very fundamental stuff. As the Kabbalah is talking about evil people, we're also having an understanding on ourselves, right? So where am I going with this? Just like we understand the evolution of the physical body from one embryo, we now can apply that like Tanya does in chapter 2 to understand the evolution of all souls in a generation. We are all brothers. When people tell me, I have no use for that Jew, I'm sorry, but you're amputating a piece of yourself. Because if you're going to cut off a fellow Jew, I don't care who he is, I don't care what he believes, and I don't care which political part of the aisle he's on. He is a piece of you because you are all the same embryo. And if the brain says, that arm is so left wing, I can't stand it. I have no use for that left arm. I'm going to chop it off. And by the way, the left leg too. You know what you look like by the time you're done? Right? Seriously. Because you don't like the left wing, right? You just messed yourself up, right? In the same exact way, every single Jew in this generation is originated in the same spiritual core. By the way, this doesn't mean that Gentiles don't have a spiritual root. I'm just focusing on the Jews. That's all. I'm just because the Tanya talks about the Jewish people, but that doesn't exclude the Gentiles as well. So let's just focus here on Jews. Of course they come from God. Everything comes from God. We just said, right? So now that we're talking about the Jews being the same spiritual root, you have to figure and recognize that every single Jew is your brother and your sister, more than your brother and your sister. They're you. They're a part of you. In the same way that the left hand has to learn to get along and live with the right foot and the right hand, even though you have different orientations, you have to learn to get together. And in fact, by the way, learning to live with your right hand and your left hand together might make for a very functional life. In the same way, we have to look at our fellow Jews in exactly the same way. Now that we understand the evolution of souls, we can understand, we're going to draw that broader to evil people as well. We said everything comes from God. God is the source of everything. If you believe that there is more than one source in God, you believe in dual gods. If you believe that God created the good things in this world, but Hitler and Hezbollah and Hamas were created by someone else, if that's what you're going to say, what do you say? You're an idolater. That's what you're doing. You're a polygamist. You believe in more than one God. And you reject Hashem Echad. You reject the belief in one God. So to be a Jew is to be a monotheist. To be a monotheist means to have the courage to say that even the parts of this world that I do not understand are also rooted in one God. Now, it might make us feel better to say that God is a good guy and God only does the good stuff and the bad stuff is not from God. It might make us feel better to say that, but that's inauthentic. You're moving the goals and you're really setting yourself up for a disaster because you're becoming an idolater. So you have to foundationally believe. Remember, it's the first of the 10 commandments. I am God, your God. And the second one is, there shall be no other gods before me. So you can't get past that. So there has to be only one God. Now, in addition to that, we know the Kabbalah tells us, Ein ra yered melamayla, no evil descends from above. So we're stuck. Because now Hamas comes from God. How does this work? So here is what the Rebbe is going to say. I'm going to put in the Rebbe's words. You ready? I'm going to read it in the Rebbe's words because it's such a profound concept. And this, bear in mind, this really requires meditation. This is not a one-time casual read and move on with your book. If you have the book, it's page 211. we're trying to get the book through the office here, hopefully. And if you want to buy the book online, guys, here it is. That's Sefer HaMaimorim. Oh, this one. You can take a picture of this from Kehot. Okay, good. Now, everything in creation. We said that the purpose of the Hanukkah lights is to transform the rebels into good, right? How do you do that? Everything in creation, even Kalipa, even the forces of evil, which conceal the revelation of his true unity, has its origin within holiness. Furthermore, commenting on the verse, there is nothing besides him. The Talmud says, that's a verse in Torah, Ein oid milvadoi, there is nothing besides him. That's in the written Torah. The Talmud explains this includes sorcerers, magicians, who actively contradict the heavenly court. So in other words, even people that are, it's a prohibition to do witchcraft. So even witches that violate the will of God, even murderers, even rapists, even terrorists, are also included in there is nothing else besides him. Because if you're going to say there is Hashem and Hamas, you're an idolater, right? However, there are certain things that cannot descend from their source within holiness through the standard process of spiritual descent, what's known as Seder Hishtalshelus. It's the sequence of divine devolution, just like the embryo evolves over 9 months, just like the souls evolve from their heavenly divine source into who we become today and how we identify, so too, these things or evil people cannot descend from their source within holiness through the standard process of spiritual descent, and not even through a tremendous number of steps. So now when it comes to the pancreas coming from the brain of the father, from the sperm of the father, when it comes to the toenail, you can draw its root all the way to the brain of the father, because again, the toenail is really not hostile to the body. Right? The toenail is not hostile to the body. It's not sabotaging.
What comes from the mother? It can't all come from
When I say father, forgive me. That thought that crossed my mind.
parent.
I meant parents. Yeah, the word in Hebrew "av" also means parent. So yeah, thank you.
Actually,
Protect me here. So what happens is that when it comes to toenails coming from the original cells of the mother and the father, the one cell, you can draw a line where the brain is a very quick evolution from the parent, and the toenail is, let's say, 50 steps. But when it comes to something which is evil, like a terrorist, no number of steps is ever going to lead to that kind of hate coming from God. And therefore, rather, they must be brought into creation through a transformative jump. There's a leap, a quantum leap, through which a connection between the initial source and holiness, and in the end result cannot be directly traced. So there's some sort of a jump from the original source where you can't track it as a sequence of evolution. Rather, there is a resistor, like in an electrical circuit. You have a resistor that changes the kind of energy. Is that the correct analogy? So when the energy originates from God and it results in something so evil as Hamas or as a terrorist, it's got to, or as a Greek, it's got to be through a process which the Kabbalah calls as follows. These types of transformations are metaphorically referred to in Kabbalah and Chassidut as interruptions or reductions or screens or shatterings and other such terms. I'm just going to give an example to explain. So if you have a light, you have a light bulb. And what does the light bulb do? It shines light. And the light is very bright. So what do? You put a lampshade. So it's not so bright anymore. And then you put like another lampshade and another lampshade. And you know what happens after you do 5 lampshades? The light is very, very, very thin, right? But if you want to turn this into something else entirely, then maybe you'll put a concrete wall. And now what's going to happen? Now there's like no light at all. So that's what you may call an interruption. Or you may do something else you might do like a colored filter, right? Or there's other forms of maybe you put a prism. Let's say you put a prism. What happens to the prism? If the light's shining on the prism, then it first of all goes in a totally different direction, right? And also it goes into a different color, right? And what happened is it's kind of difficult to say how the green light or the red light is coming from the white light over there, right? It's like different direction. It's going this way. And why is it a different color? Because there's been an alteration. There's been some sort of a quantum leap. And that's an analogy to explain how the energy which is sourced in God evolves eventually into becoming something which is actually against God. Yeah.
If God-
Sorry about that. Yeah.
If God creates everything, which we say,
Yeah.
then God can we then push that God created this blockage that's stopping this from coming down? I'm just
Yeah. God created this blockage because he wanted there to be evil people in this world for whatever reason. Yeah. But they are sourced in God. So God created this process. What was that, Steve?
My question is, and it can't be true, the way you're describing it's all based upon DNA. So the environment has nothing to do with this?
Of course, the environment has a lot to do with this. It's not just in nature, it's also nurture. But we're trying to keep it focused right now in order to understand the process before you throw in the exceptions. Were you going to ask something?
No, my question doesn't.
Good.
Why not just stick with the initial idea and say that we're all born good because we all come from the same
Oh, and then
source?
free will, you can
And then
evolve.
free will or education, which means that the parents
That's the
educated them
external
badly,
influence, right?
like the Hamas.
You know what?
terrorist one.
Okay, so let me try to apply this idea of free choice. So let me say this. I think what happened was when you look at the creation of the world, the creative process, God is almighty and infinite. And what did God do? He creates a world where in this space of this world, this is called the Olam Hazeh Tacht, and it's called this world, the lowest. That's what this world is called. It's the name of this world, this lowest world. Why is it called this lowest world? Because the divine awareness, the consciousness of God in this world is zilch. Zilch. In other words, this world is like the light behind the concrete wall. Well, how much light is shining behind the concrete wall? Garnished. It's lights out. There is absolutely no consciousness about God in this world. You can live an entire life and not be aware of God. It took an Abraham to figure out that there was a God, right? But you can live an entire life and attribute, most normal people, they attribute power to politics, to money, to military, to influence, to power. I mean, that's how people evolve. How people look at the world. They don't, it's not obvious that there's a God in this world. Now, if you lived in a higher spiritual world, what has been a higher spiritual world? Higher. Is it physically higher? It's not physically higher. It's consciously higher. It's more aware of truth. In the world of angels, for example, or the world of souls. So the world of souls is where the souls go after they die. It's called Olam HaEmes, the world of truth. And this world is also known as Alma Shikra, the world of lies, the world of falsehood. Because when a soul dies, it goes up to Olam HaEmes, to the world of truth. When now the soul is like, oh my God, I didn't realize that I was living my whole life running away from God, which is the truth. And now I'm finally aware of this. You know, by the way, when a parent gives an instruction to a child not to sit shiva for them, or if a parent gives an instruction to a child to cremate them in violation of Torah law, the rule in Torah is that we ignore, even though you're supposed to listen very meticulously to the instruction of a parent, of a person before they die. When they give an instruction which is contrary to the Torah law, you are supposed to override and ignore. Why? Because then when they gave the instruction, they were under false pretense, false impression in this world. But now they're in Olam HaEmes. Now they're in the world of truth, and now they wish that you would ignore them and do the right thing, right? So the higher worlds are worlds of awareness. This is a world of total blackout. And that being, I just want to finish this thought thing. I don't want to lose my train of thought here. So I was saying, why was I saying about this world being a world of total blackout? Because I was trying to answer somebody's question here that
we're all born the same.
Fine. So God, to a free choice question. So what happens is that God creates a stage where we are an open road, and we can choose good or choose evil, and it says that in the Torah. You can choose life or you can choose death. I mean, who in their right mind will choose death? Think about that for a second. Like, why would you choose death? You know, if you have a choice between, creme brulee or poison that will kill you, which one are you going to choose? Right? Which one are you going to drink? You're going to drink the martini, or you're going to drink the poison that you're going to die from? God created a world where it's so topsy-turvy and so lost, so confusing, that we don't know right from wrong, up from down, except that in the Torah it says, by the way, I'm giving you advice. You should choose life. You should choose the right thing. And that's why it's in this setting, Andy. It's in this setting where I believe only in this world we're able to have free choice. Because in the world of angels, you can't have free choice. When it's clear, obvious, and apparent that God is almighty and supreme, how could you have free choice? Today, I think I'm going to sin. You're in the Oval Office. You're in the presence of the White House, of the President of the United States of America. You're not going to make him angry, right? When you're aware that you're in the presence of God, you're not going to violate the will of God. but only in this world, which is a world of such utter darkness, behind the concrete wall, behind the interruptions, reductions, the screens, and the shatterings. Here, we're able to
Don't
perhaps
realize
reach that
you're-
stage where we're able to have free choice, where free choice is a manifestation of that darkness.
The world cannot exist without difficulty and evil. It's like the chrysalis and the caterpillar. It's like the way that we evolve. The whole nature of the world, the challenges that are put in front of us, these things are ultimately perhaps not evil.
Okay, so I just want
Why
to
do good things happen to bad people? It goes on and on that way.
right. So I just want to
Anyway,
challenge your premise. Your premise is that bad is a necessary part of this world. Okay, just like the chrysalis is or the chrysalis is necessary part of the butterfly's life or this worm's life,
And the challenges we receive as individuals.
and the challenges we receive as individuals are what make us great. I just want to challenge you to consider that the world we live in is not natural, because we were created into a world in the Garden of Eden where there was no evil and no suffering. And it was only as a result of the sin of Adam and Eve that God inflicted upon mankind the pain of childbirth and pain of fertility and the pain of child rearing and the pain of making a living, right? By the sweat of your brow shall you eat bread. And that when Mashiach will come, we won't need to struggle. We won't need to suffer anymore. That'll be beautiful. Can you imagine a world without illness, Jack? A world without illness? Is that even possible? That's a big topic. And I just want to say this. I'm gonna address it because Harvey, I know you had something to say, but I wanted to address this beautiful point. Oh, you answered it. So I just want to say this, that I want to just zone in on that. So why do we have the evil in this world? Because in the Garden of Eden, before Adam and Eve ate from the fruit, from the plant of higher consciousness, what happened was evil was not part of them. Evil was like in the snake. Evil was in this plant of higher consciousness, in this ayahuasca thing, right? It was there. And it was not part of them. They were purely good. But the moment they ingested the fruit, now the first thing that happened was that they became filled with ego. They became self-aware, which is why they covered their nakedness, right? The first thing that happened when they ate the fruit of the plant was that they became self-aware. And that's why God says, I have to give you pain. I have to give you pain to mitigate your ego. But once Mashiach comes, we will have lit the Hanukkah lights to the point that the rebels have been turned. We will have reunited the rebels with their spiritual core, where we will have sublimated the ego, into its spiritual root, which is pure, beautiful, and holy. And therefore, we won't need to have pain anymore. This is our Hanukkah, is the template of our lives. And it's a broader understanding. It's a very courageous understanding to be able to look at the core of evil. This is a very mystical concept, friends. I mean, I hope you're okay with it. I hope you don't think I'm nuts for saying this. But just to finish this point, that if you're able to trace it back, I mean, why did Adam and Eve eat the fruit? Why did they eat the fruit? Were they seriously so pathetic that they were placed in this garden? And you could eat anything in the garden except for one thing. Chassidus explains, Harvey, not only did God want them to, they understood that God wanted them to. They understood that. I'm not going to get into it right now, but they understood that life
Life was too ideal.
And the role
30 minutes of it?
and the role of mankind in this world was to sublimate evil, was to turn ego into holy, to turn the dark into light. And they basically said to God, listen, we're going to jump into the deep end. We know it's going to hurt like hell. As we spoke about in a previous class, we spoke about the debate between Yitzchak and Rivka, right? That was the debate we spoke about the other day. So they understood it's going to hurt like hell. And it's going to be 4,500 years, 5,700 years of brutal torture. But you know what? Probably it's worth it, said Eve. Here, have a bite. Right? Obviously, we might disagree, but it's like the previous Rebbe when he was released from his incarceration at the hands of the KGB, the Soviets. They crippled him. They really they tortured him terribly. He said, if you would have paid me, if you would have asked me if I'm willing to accept the suffering beforehand, you couldn't pay me $1 million to agree to accept the suffering. This is important to tell you this. Now, $1 million in 1950, I think, was a lot more than $1 million is today. How much was a house? How much did a house cost in 1950? A house in Mirasol, how much was it? $25,000. So this would be if a house today is $1 million, this would be $40 million, right? Right. No, we're talking about the cheap side of the tracks right now.
Getting off on
All
a
right,
tangent.
all right, fine. So you couldn't pay me $40 million. Let's say $100 million. You couldn't pay me $100 million to agree to accept that degree of suffering. However, said the previous Rebbe, after I've endured that suffering, that unthinkable trauma. I mean, think of the hostage that we had yesterday from Gaza. After I've endured that kind of suffering, think of the faith with which she spoke yesterday. Her emunah, her faith in God. After that degree of suffering, if you asked me to buy that merit from me for $100 million, I would not sell. Right? And this is where we're going. We're just getting our feet wet into this profound discourse, which is going to reset the stage on how everything comes from God. And with that mindset, you are never intimidated by anyone in your path. No Greek, no Arab, no jihadist, no North Korean, no Russian is intimidating. No United Nations, no politician. Nobody makes you afraid because you know that at their root, I know who you are.
Why did he say that?
What did he say?
Why did he say that?
What? Who say that?
Why did the rabbi say you couldn't buy it back from me? Why did he say that?
So why did he say that?
Can I
Because,
make
It was very
a
important.
suggestion? Because he learned his faith.
like the chrysalis that you addressed,
Yes.
right?
But he
Or
learned- he
a
learned-
deeper answer I want to share with you. Perhaps a deeper answer. So one thing is because the regression leads to greater progression. Fair. But perhaps where this discourse is going is even deeper, to suggest that it's the transformation of night into light that is not only a personal benefit, it is the very purpose of our existence upon this earth in the very first place. Lighting the Hanukkah lights at night after nightfall, after dark, is what this is all about. We've got to turn evil people into good. Thank
I have
you.
a question.
Yeah.
If it's our duty, our obligation, our fate to turn darkness into light, to turn evil into good, how does that square with the fact that Jews don't convert others?
We don't need to convert there. Somebody's asking a question.
We don't convert.
Somebody's asking a question. I'm thinking about Gentiles here. There is no need to convert anybody to Judaism.
Because everybody's soul is the way. it's
You don't
intended
need to be Jewish because everybody's soul is what?
Is the way it's intended to be.
Exactly.
Whatever
No,
journey it's
no,
supposed
you-
to have.
The point is that it's we do our thing.
Yeah.
We pray to God. We live a godlike life. It's not our job to worry about the evil people and to turn them into anything.
Well, when Eve ate from the
Unless-
fruit, I disagree with
unless
you.
The Christians say we're going to convert everybody. We're going to make others like us because we feel that's the better way. We don't. So why is it my job?
I think you're confusing two things. I think you're confusing two things. You're assuming that transforming bad into good means converting them to Judaism. It's not the same thing.
No.
You don't have to be converted to Judaism.
Oh,
You
okay.
just have to have
Take
a
away-
healthy relationship with God Almighty. That's it, wherever you are.
But we're
Take away-
supposed to
take
be a
away
light.
the Jew-
We're supposed
Yes,
to be
a light unto the nations. We're not supposed to be a converter to the nations. We're not supposed to be missionary to the nations. A light. We're supposed to illuminate. That's it. We're supposed to have the nations
By our
say.
example, all the bad will become good.
What?
Yes, if they-
Are you asking a question on here?
Yeah, so to follow Harvey's point, so by our example, evil will be turned into good. Because Hamas will say, oh, look at that, the Jew. You know what? I want to be a Jew. I wanna live like a
Why do you have to be a Jew?
I'm gonna live like a Jew.
Why not? Well, Muslims can serve God through Allah Akbar.
Okay.
Why can't they do that?
It's got 7 Noah laws.
It's
That's
not
all.
because of what we say, it's because of how we live.
Right. And when a Jew lives his life in a way where his faith, her faith, lights away, like this hostage just spoke to us last night at our event, this hostage in Gaza, when she lives with so much faith imbued in her deepest darkness, that's a very, very inspirational message. for Gentiles to say, wow, maybe it's time for me to embrace my faith. In other words, maybe it's time for me to stop. Imagine a Muslim would say, maybe we have to stop defining ourselves by the Jews' success. And maybe it's time for us to define ourselves by our success. That's what Abu Dhabi did, by the way. Abraham Accords. Think about that. Was it John Kerry or Kissinger? Kissinger. What a disgrace. He was the one who said that there can be no war in the Middle East without Egypt. And there can be no peace in the Middle East without the Palestinians.
Yeah, it's his own made up.
Right?
Whatever.
Baba Mike, John Kerry said the same thing. You can't make peace without the Palestinians. Comes to Abraham Accords and like, listen, commercial success. Abu Dhabi, you want to be stuck in the 14th century or you want to be the world's most sophisticated country? Which one do you want? Right? And guess what happened? Instead of defining themselves by the Jewish people's success, they were like, what, can't beat them, join them. We're going to share intel and share technology with them. And suddenly,
Well, don't like Kissinger and Kerry blame Barack and
Getting off on the tangent.
Whatever.
whoever. Yeah, exactly.
the Israeli leaders who agreed to
The Israel, Barack, you mean Israel? I think you meant Barack Obama.
No, not Barack
Sorry.
Obama. No.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, the Israeli leaders also very, very weak, lacking in self-confidence and self-assurance, lacking in their identity. Right, sorry, Steve.
Question. Why don't we continue to light Hanukkah candles every day until all?
Till it's done. So we have to see the discourse. Bear that question in mind. As we proceed through the discourse, let's see if we're able to answer that question. It's an interesting question.
Rabbi, you said a couple of days ago, I quoted Rumi. You said, when I was young, I tried to change the world. When I became old and wise, I tried to change myself. I think the nexus is all
Rumi.
is all how we live.
The next what?
The nexus of change is not what we say, but how we live.
How we live, exactly. Guys, it's time for us to connect to our core values. It's absolutely a time for us. Yeah, here's a question, Rob. How can a guy have a healthy relationship with God without really knowing anything about him as specified from Torah? Interesting question from Michael, right? How can a guy, a Gentile, have a healthy relationship with God without really knowing anything about him as specified from Torah? The answer is learn. It's all available. You can learn with me. You can learn on Chabad.org. You can learn the internet is available to you. Yeah, you can learn the Torah. You can learn what God has to say to the nations of the world. There's 7 Noahide laws, and I'm going to tell you right now what they are. You can learn about the 7 Noahide laws: not to murder, not to steal, not to commit adultery, not to commit idolatry, not to be cruel to animals, to make courts of law, and not to curse God. That's not very complicated. You got to believe in one God. You got to have social ethics and nice laws, justice, right? And if you can live an upright life with consciousness of God, and I want to encourage you, Michael, use the word Baruch Hashem. You can do a little Hebrew, right? When somebody asks you how you're doing, say Baruch Hashem. Say thank God, right? How cool is that? Throw out a little Hebrew, right? And then say thank God, or say Mirz Hashem, God willing. I'm going to see you tomorrow, God willing. Bring God into your conversations. Bring God to your dinner table. Bring God to your dining room table. And again, recognize that God created you not as a mistake, not as some sort of a prop on the stage. You are center of the universe. Why did God create you, Michael? Because God felt that without you, the world couldn't exist. The world couldn't continue to exist. You have a unique role in creation. You don't have to be Jewish to have a unique role. I talk about Jews because this is my people, But when I finish with the Jews, I'll move on to the Gentiles. You know what I mean? I got a big work ahead of me. Not sure how many lifetimes that's going to take. But generally speaking, all human beings are created by God. That's what I said, right? There's no such thing as as something which is created outside of the intention of God. This is very beautiful stuff. It's deep stuff. I want you to meditate on this, guys. If you get the book, try to buy the book and try to read it over, try to reflect. Bear in mind, you'll see patterns fitting into space about ancient patterns falling into place about ancient anti-Semites and how they're approached in Torah. You'll see that, God willing, as we proceed.